I was standing in the doorway of Brandon's apartment, holding a bag of his favorite takeout. I had finished work early and wanted to surprise him, but the sound of laughter from the living room made me stop. A girl I didn't recognize was sitting on the sofa, her voice light and teasing. "Come on, Brandon, she seems nice," she said with a smirk. "Why are you still with her?" My heart skipped a beat as I waited for his answer. Brandon didn't even hesitate. He scoffed and leaned back, his expression full of boredom. "Harper? She's just too basic. I mean, look at her. She's safe, but she's definitely not enough." The words felt like a physical weight on my chest. I stepped into the room before I could stop myself, dropping the bag of food on the side table. "Say that again," I whispered. Brandon and the girl both froze. He didn't look guilty. He just looked annoyed that his evening had been interrupted. "You heard me, Harper," he said, shrugging his shoulders. "You're just not enough." The girl beside him giggled, looking me up and down like I was a piece of plain cardboard. Something inside me snapped. I didn't scream or cry. I just turned around and walked out into the cold night air. I sat in my car for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Too basic. The words kept playing in my head like a broken record. I had spent 2 years supporting Brandon, helping him with his career and making sure he felt loved, only for him to reduce my entire existence to a single, insulting word. He thought I was nothing more than a background character in his life. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was a text from Brandon. "Don't be dramatic, Harper. We can talk about this later." I didn't reply. I couldn't even bring myself to type a single letter. Instead, I opened my email app. There was one message at the top of my inbox that I had been too nervous to open all day. I had auditioned for a major national beauty campaign weeks ago, but I never thought I would actually get it. The subject line read, "Final selection, campaign approval." My breath caught in my throat as I tapped the screen. I scrolled past the formal greetings until my eyes landed on the words that changed everything. "Congratulations, Harper Carter. You have been selected as the face of our new national campaign." I read the email 3 times before reality finally started to sink in. I wasn't just a backup or a minor model. I was the face of the entire brand. The campaign wasn't just for social media or a few magazines. It included a series of massive billboards that would be placed all over the city, including one right outside the office building where Brandon worked. My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't from the pain of his betrayal. It was from a surge of pure, concentrated disbelief. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Was I basic? I had always dressed simply and kept my makeup natural because that's what made me feel comfortable. Brandon had used my simplicity as a reason to look down on me. He thought my lack of flashiness meant a lack of value. But this global brand saw something else. They saw a face that people could trust and a look that was timeless. They didn't want someone extra or complicated. They wanted me. I realized then that Brandon's opinion of me wasn't a fact. It was just a reflection of his own shallow heart. He called me not enough because he wasn't capable of seeing how much I truly offered. The next morning, I arrived at the studio for the first official photo shoot. The energy in the room was electric. Stylists were rushing around with racks of designer clothes, and makeup artists were setting up their kits. When I walked in, the creative director, a woman named Elena, came straight over to me. "Harper, darling, you are exactly what we needed," she said, giving me a warm hug. "Your look is so fresh and authentic. We're going to create something iconic today." I spent 4 hours in hair and makeup. They didn't change who I was. They just polished the features I already had. When I finally looked in the full-length mirror, I gasped. I was wearing a stunning, high-fashion dress that felt like it was made of liquid gold. My skin was glowing, and my eyes looked brighter than they ever had before. I didn't look like a different person. I looked like the best possible version of myself. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a shadow standing behind Brandon. I felt like the main event. I stepped onto the set, and as the camera started clicking, I let go of every mean word Brandon had ever said to me. While I was busy building my new life, Brandon continued to act as if he had done nothing wrong. He kept sending me casual texts, asking where his favorite blue shirt was, or if I wanted to grab dinner. He truly believed that I was so basic and safe that I would never actually leave him. He thought I had nowhere else to go. I finally decided to send him one last message. "I'm done, Brandon. Please pack my things and leave them with the doorman. Do not contact me again." He replied almost instantly, and his tone had shifted from casual to mean.
Fine.
Go be boring somewhere else. You'll realize pretty quickly that nobody else is going to put up with someone as plain as you. Good luck finding anyone who thinks you're special. I blocked his number right after reading it. I felt a strange sense of peace. He was still trying to define me, still trying to keep me in that small box. But I was already out. I was focused on my work, my growth, and the giant billboards that were being printed at that very moment. He had no idea that the plain girl he just insulted was about to become the most visible person in the city. The weeks leading up to the campaign launch were a whirlwind. I was traveling for press events and doing interviews. I had to learn how to handle the attention and how to carry myself with confidence. Every time I felt a flicker of doubt, I thought about Brandon's scoffing laugh. I used his negativity as fuel. I wanted to prove to myself that I was more than enough. I started to realize that my basicness was actually my strength. It was my authenticity. In a world full of people trying to be something they weren't, I was just being me. I moved into a small, beautiful apartment of my own. I filled it with plants and books and things that made me happy. It was the first time in my adult life that I wasn't sharing a space with someone who made me feel small. I spent my evenings reflecting on the 2 years I wasted trying to please someone who was never going to be satisfied. Brandon didn't want a partner. He wanted a trophy he could criticize. I was finally learning how to be my own hero. The campaign was set to go live on Monday morning, and I could feel the anticipation building in my chest. Monday morning arrived. I woke up early and took a long walk through the city. I wanted to see it for myself. As I rounded the corner near the Central Plaza, I stopped dead in my tracks. There it was. A massive billboard, 3 stories high, featuring my face. I looked radiant. My eyes were focused and strong, and the brand's logo was elegant beneath my chin. People were stopping to look at it. A group of teenagers was taking pictures in front of it. I stood in the crowd, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, completely anonymous. It was a surreal feeling. I was watching the world look at me, but for the right reasons. I wasn't being looked at because I was standing next to Brandon. I was being looked at because of my own merit. I walked a few more blocks to the area where Brandon worked. Right above the entrance to his office building was another billboard. This one was even larger. There was no way he could enter or leave his job without seeing me. I felt a cold, sharp sense of satisfaction. He wanted me to be invisible, but now I was unavoidable. The basic girl was now a literal giant in his world. Back at the office, Brandon was having a typical Monday. He was walking into work with a coffee in one hand and his phone in the other, probably checking his social media for more exciting girls. As he approached the glass doors of his building, he heard several of his coworkers talking and pointing upward. "Who is that?" "She's stunning," one of them said. Brandon looked up, expecting to see a famous actress or a supermodel he followed online. Instead, he saw me. His coffee cup almost slipped from his hand. He stared at the billboard, his mouth hanging open. The girl he had called plain and not enough was staring down at him with a look of supreme confidence. He stood there for several minutes, frozen on the sidewalk. People were bumping into him, but he didn't move. He looked at the name on the corner of the ad, Harper Carter. There was no mistake. It was me. The basic girl he had dumped in his apartment was now the face of $1 million campaign. I can only imagine the shock that went through his system at that moment. The news spread through his office like wildfire. Brandon had spent months complaining to his work friends about his boring girlfriend. Now, those same friends were asking him if he knew the girl on the billboard. "Hey, Brandon, isn't that your ex?" "Harper," his manager asked during a meeting. Brandon tried to play it cool, but his face was bright red. "Yeah, we used to date." "She must have gotten lucky," he muttered. But nobody was buying it. They could see how incredible I looked, and they could see that Brandon had clearly made a huge mistake. He couldn't escape me. Throughout the day, every time he looked out the window, I was there. Every time he went for lunch, my face was on the bus stops. Every time he opened a news website, my ad popped up. I was everywhere he turned. The girl he thought was a nobody had become the biggest somebody in his life. He started to realize that the reason I was plain to him was because he had been looking at me through the eyes of a bully. He hadn't seen my beauty because he didn't value my heart. Now, the whole world was valuing both. I started getting calls from people I hadn't talked to in years. Old high school friends, distant relatives, and even a few of Brandon's friends reached out to congratulate me. But I didn't hear from Brandon himself for 3 days. I knew he was stewing in his own regret. Finally, on Thursday night, my phone lit up with a notification from a number I didn't recognize. I had blocked him, but he had clearly used a different phone to get a message through. "Harper, I saw the billboards. You look different. I think we should talk." I was under a lot of stress that night, and I didn't mean what I said. "Can we get a drink and catch up?" I stared at the screen, a cold smile spreading across my face. He wasn't apologizing because he realized he was mean. He was reaching out because I was famous. He wanted to be associated with the face of the campaign. He didn't miss Harper. He missed the status I now represented. I didn't even bother to reply. I just deleted the message and went back to my book. He had his chance to love the basic girl, and he threw it away. The campaign continued to go viral. I was invited to appear on a popular morning talk show to discuss my sudden success. During the interview, the host asked me about the inspiration behind my confidence. I took a deep breath and looked directly into the camera. "For a long time, I let someone else define who I was," I said. "I was told I was basic and that I wasn't enough. But I realized that those words were just a reflection of their own insecurity. Once I stopped listening to the lies, I found my own strength. I knew Brandon was watching. I knew he would hear those words and know exactly who I was talking about. I wasn't being mean. I was just being honest. My story resonated with thousands of people who had been made to feel small by their partners. My social media following exploded, and I began to receive messages from women all over the world telling me that my story gave them the courage to leave toxic relationships. My basic life had turned into a platform for empowerment. I was no longer just a model. I was a symbol of resilience. A few weeks later, I was invited to a high-end fashion gala. It was the kind of event Brandon had always dreamed of attending. I arrived in a breathtaking black gown, my hair styled in elegant waves. As I walked the red carpet, the flashes of the cameras were constant. I felt like I was floating. Halfway through the evening, I spotted a familiar face in the crowd. It was Brandon. He was standing near the bar, looking out of place in a rented tuxedo. He was trying to talk to a group of photographers, but they were ignoring him. Our eyes met for a split second. I saw the desperation in his expression. He started to walk toward me, weaving through the crowd with a forced smile on his face. He thought this was his moment to win me back in front of everyone. I stood my ground, my heart perfectly calm. I didn't feel anger or fear. I just felt nothing. He reached me and tried to grab my hand. "Harper, you look incredible. I've been trying to get a hold of you. I'm so proud of what we achieved together," he said, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "What have we achieved?" I asked, my voice cool and clear. "Brandon, you didn't achieve anything. You spent 2 years telling me I was a nobody. You told me I was too basic to be anything more than your shadow." A few people nearby turned to look. Brandon's smile faltered. "I was just joking, Harper. You know how I am. Come on, let's go somewhere quiet and talk." He tried to pull me toward a corner, but I pulled my hand back firmly. "There is nothing to talk about," I said. "You were right about one thing, though. I wasn't enough for you. But that's because you were looking for something shallow, and I was always too deep for you to understand. Please stay away from me." I turned my back on him and walked toward a group of my new friends. I didn't look back to see his reaction. I didn't need to. I had finally closed the chapter on him. He was just a ghost from a past life, and I was living in a bright, beautiful present. The next morning, a video of our encounter at the gala went viral on a celebrity gossip site. Someone had recorded the whole thing. The headline read, "Model Harper Carter sets the record straight with entitled X." The comments were overwhelmingly in my favor. People loved seeing a woman stand up for herself and refuse to let a toxic person back into her life. Brandon's reputation, which he cared about so much, was in tatters. He was known as the guy who tried to take credit for a woman he had bullied. I didn't seek fame, and I didn't seek revenge. It just happened as a natural result of me being honest. I realized that the best revenge isn't a loud argument or a mean prank. It's simply living your best life and refusing to give the person who hurt you any more of your time. Brandon had tried to steal my light, but all he did was make me realize how bright I could shine on my own. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for that basic girl who had the courage to walk out of that apartment. She was the real hero of this story. My career continued to flourish. I was offered a multi-year contract with the brand, and I started working on my own line of natural skincare products. I wanted to help other women feel beautiful in their own skin without needing to hide behind layers of extra stuff. I spent my days in meetings, on sets, and in the lab. I was busy, I was fulfilled, and I was happy. I had a team of people who respected my vision and valued my input. I was no longer a background character. I eventually heard that Brandon had lost his job. His obsession with my success had distracted him so much that his performance dropped, and his boss finally let him go. He was struggling to find new work because of the viral video from the gala. He had become a joke in the industry. I didn't feel happy about his failure, but I didn't feel sad either. It was just the consequence of his own choices. He had built his life on a foundation of superficiality and arrogance, and it had finally collapsed under the weight of the truth. I decided to take a short break and visit my parents in my small hometown. I wanted to reconnect with the roots that Brandon had always mocked. When I arrived at the train station, my dad was there to meet me. He gave me a huge bear hug and held me at arm's length. "We are so proud of you, Harper," he said, his eyes misty. "Not because of the billboards, but because you stayed true to yourself." Those words meant more to me than any award or magazine cover. We spent the weekend doing basic things, hiking in the woods, eating at the local diner, and sitting on the porch talking. I realized that these were the things that made me who I was. Brandon called these things boring, but they were the things that gave me peace. I wasn't basic. I was grounded. I was connected to the people and places that actually mattered. I felt a surge of love for my simple life. It was the foundation that allowed me to reach for the stars. I was ready to go back to the city and continue my journey, but I would always carry this peace with me. While I was at my parents' house, I received an email from an agent representing a major international fashion week. They wanted me to open the show for a world-renowned designer. It was the biggest opportunity of my life. I knew it would be a huge challenge, but I also knew I was ready. I spent the next 2 weeks training, practicing my walk, working on my posture, and preparing mentally for the pressure of the global stage. I flew to Paris, the city of lights. The energy was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The streets were filled with models, designers, and fashion icons from all over the world. I felt like I was in a dream. I walked into the fitting for the designer, a man named Pierre, who looked at me with a sharp, discerning eye. "You have something rare, Harper," he said in a thick French accent. "You have a soul that shows through your eyes. Do not let the glitter of this world dim that." I promised him I wouldn't. The night of the show arrived. The venue was a historic palace, filled with gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. The front row was packed with celebrities and powerful editors. I stood backstage, my heart racing as the music started to throb. I was wearing a dress that was a work of art, a structure of white silk that looked like a cloud. I took a deep breath and stepped out onto the runway. The lights were blinding, but I focused on the end of the stage. I walked with a strength and grace I didn't know I possessed. Every step was a statement. I wasn't just a girl on a billboard anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. When I reached the end of the runway, I paused and looked directly at the photographers. I saw the flashes and heard the murmurs of the crowd. I felt a wave of pure, unadulterated joy. I had done it. I had gone from a basic girl in a small apartment to the opening model for a Parisian fashion show. I turned and walked back, a small, knowing smile on my face. After the show, the reviews were glowing. Critics called me the new face of authenticity and praised my commanding presence. I was invited to an after-party at a rooftop lounge overlooking the Eiffel Tower. As I was talking to a group of international editors, I noticed a man staring at me from across the room. It was Brandon. He looked disheveled and desperate, having somehow found a way to sneak into the event. He waited until I was alone for a moment and then rushed over. "Harper, please. I traveled all the way here just to see you. I've lost everything. I realize now that you were the best thing that ever happened to me. Please, can we just try one more time? I'll do anything." He was literally shaking, his eyes full of tears. I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt a twinge of pity, not because I loved him, but because he was so lost. He still didn't understand that you can't build a relationship on regret. "Brandon, look around," I said, gesturing to the beautiful city and the successful people in the room. "I didn't get here because of you, and I'm not going to stay here because of you. You had 2 years to be the man you're pretending to be now, but you chose to be a bully instead. You didn't lose me because I became famous. You lost me because you didn't value me when I was nothing." He tried to argue, to make more excuses, but I just held up a hand to stop him. "Go home, Brandon. Find a way to be a better person for yourself, not because you want something from me. We're done. Forever." I signaled to the security guard nearby, who stepped in and gently but firmly led Brandon away. I watched him go, and I felt the last lingering tether to my old life finally snap. I was free. Truly, completely free. I turned back to the party and enjoyed the rest of my night in the City of Lights. I returned to New York a week later, feeling like a different person. I was no longer Harper Carter, the girl who was dumped. I was just Harper Carter. My identity was no longer tied to my past or to the man who tried to break me. I spent my first few days back in my apartment, enjoying the quiet. I looked at the billboard outside my window, which was still there, but it didn't feel like a weapon of revenge anymore. It just felt like a job well done. I received a call from my agent. A major publisher wanted to work with me on a memoir. They wanted me to tell my story in my own words. I hesitated at first. I wasn't sure if I was ready to share everything. But then I thought about the messages I had received from women all over the world. If my story could help even one person realize their own worth, then it was worth telling. I signed the contract and started writing that very afternoon. I called the first chapter, The Basic Girl. Writing the book was a healing process. I had to go back and look at the darkest moments of my relationship with Brandon. I had to admit the times I allowed him to treat me poorly because I didn't think I deserved better. It was hard, but it was necessary. I realized that my success wasn't just about modeling. It was about the internal work I had done to rebuild my self-esteem. I was proud of the woman I was becoming, someone who was strong, kind, and unapologetically herself. The book was released 6 months later and became an instant bestseller. I went on a book tour, meeting thousands of people who had been touched by my words. I heard stories of women who had left toxic marriages, started their own businesses, and finally learned how to love themselves. I realized that my voice was the most powerful tool I had. My basic life had turned into a global conversation about worth and resilience. I felt a deep sense of purpose that I had never found in a photo shoot. One day, I was sitting in a park in Brooklyn, reading a book, when a man sat down on the bench next to me. He was kind-looking, with a warm smile and a gentle energy. We started talking about the book I was reading, and before I knew it, an hour had passed. He didn't know who I was, and he didn't care about the billboards or the fashion shows. He just liked talking to me. It was the most basic interaction I had had in years, and it was perfect. We started dating slowly. He was a schoolteacher who loved his students and spent his weekends volunteering at an animal shelter. He was the opposite of Brandon in every way. He didn't want a trophy. He wanted a partner. He listened to my stories, supported my dreams, and made me laugh until my sides ached. I realized that this was what a healthy relationship looked like. It wasn't about drama or flashiness. It was about mutual respect and genuine affection. I was finally experiencing the love I had always deserved. I drove past the location of my first billboard one night, about a year after the campaign had ended. The ad had been replaced long ago by a new campaign for a different brand. I stopped the car and looked at the empty space for a moment. I thought about the girl who had stood there a year ago, anonymous and scared. I wanted to reach through time and give her a hug. I wanted to tell her that everything was going to be better than she could ever imagine. I looked at my reflection in the window. I wasn't wearing much makeup, and my hair was in a simple ponytail. I looked basic, and I loved it. I realized that the billboard was just a moment in time, but the confidence it gave me was forever. I didn't need my face on a building to know that I was enough. I had the respect of my peers, the love of my family, and most importantly, the love for myself. I put the car in gear and drove toward my new life, a smile on my face. I stood on the stage of a major empowerment summit, looking out at a sea of thousands of faces. I had been asked to give the keynote speech. I didn't have a script. I just spoke from the heart. I was once told I was too basic to be successful. I said, my voice echoing through the hall. I was told I wasn't enough. But I'm standing here today to tell you that the only person who gets to define your value is you. The room erupted in a standing ovation. I felt a surge of pure, overwhelming gratitude. I had taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and turned it into the best. I had proven that basic isn't a bad thing. It's a foundation. It's the truth of who we are when all the noise is stripped away. I walked off the stage and into the arms of my partner, who was waiting for me with a huge smile. I was Harper Carter. It was enough. And for the first time in my life, I was truly, beautifully at peace.